Hey everybody, Edo here, and for this week's League video, I'm going to sort of take a different angle from how to make games and Kickstarters and that sort of things, and to talk about board game developers and graphic designers. I was actually in a discussion on our League of Gamemakers forum with J.R. Honeycutt and Luke Laurie about developers in general, because it's actually a very sensitive subject to me. It's something I care a lot about, coming from the video game space. And that is that in board games, oftentimes developers and graphic designers aren't recognized for the level of effort and input and impact they have on your experience as an end user, as a gamer in board games. And in particular, in this context of this discussion, I was really complaining that I think Board Game Geek continues to attribute to the problem because they don't allow for those people to get recognition for working as developers or designers and working as graphic artists and graphic designers in games. The way it's set up is sort of, there's the designer, the mechanics guy, the Bausa, the Fristo, the guy who does that piece, and then there's the artist or the illustrator, right? And who typically will have done the card art or those pictures. Now, in some games, the designer does the rule book, they do all the pieces, there's just one designer, and that's that person, and then the artist not only does the character or illustration art, but also all the UI and instructions, the layout, and the box, right? Like, there really are efforts where that's the case. Liftoff, for example, I was doing the design, Nicole was doing the art, she did all the board art, she did all the character art, she did the iconography. She actually was the genius behind the Alien Meeples. As aliens, I was just going to do meeples, but she wanted to hand make those guys and set us off on an adventure of it on its own. So there are cases where that's the extent of it. Then there are cases like, say, The Siblings Trouble, where Kim Robinson effectively is a graphic designer. I mean, she was a major partner and person within the project and helped with design and development and all those things, but her skill set, her background is graphic design, and she was responsible for bringing in this art from quite a wide range of people coming in lots of different parts. There was a ton of illustrators on that project at all different times, none of which were there for the extent of the project. It was like a hodgepodge of people coming together, but she was who brought it all in and gave it a unifying feel and look, even though she wasn't responsible for any of the direct illustration, right? The icons, the cards, the feel, the box, all those pieces, how they all come together, right? She pulled that together. And so forth and so on. Again, for Murder of Crows, Thomas Denmark did both. He did the card art and the layout and the design and all that. So he did all of that stuff, where in Heroes and Tricks, Dustin was he did all this incredible character art, and he did some initial UI, but it was really Ben Showman who came through and really worked all the icons, the layouts, the presentation, and pulled it together and just did a fantastic job on that project. So, I mean, those are some specific examples, and I'm sorry to have spent that much time on it, but the point is, I was complaining because oftentimes players have no idea those people exist. Yes, 99% of the time, the instructions include credits for all people appropriately. This isn't a comment about somehow the industry doesn't recognize people in the credits and the instructions. I really think that in most cases it's there. But, and actually I'm also not arguing that it should, the cover of the box should have everyone's name, right? The way that marketing and box covers works and credits and what people's expectations are there is another thing. But when I thought of, and in this discussion, when I think of Board Game Geek, I think of it as this place that's not only for, the end user, but it's really the representation of it's the IMDb of board games. It really is. And it bothers me, and this is what I was talking about, that developers and graphic designers who are so fundamental to what you as a player experience with a game, and fundamental to the fun of it and the experience of it and the ease of learning and everything that goes in there, that they didn't have an ability to represent themselves. And anecdotally, stories of being asked not to be included because they're not the key illustrator or not the key designer, right? Oh, putting two names in the design column is calling them co-designers, or these sort of assumptions that A graphic designer or a developer should be able to look themselves up on Board Game Geek and see the projects they worked on. Now, is that Board Game Geek's responsibility? No, not at all. They can do whatever they want. They can be a for-profit. Like, it's they. Sometimes you are something that is a business transcends or moves beyond just the business reality. The fact of the matter is, Board Game Geek is a core part of the industry and everyone associated with it. Whether or not that was the objective of Board Game Geek or the mission statement of that company, it's still a real connection point. So they may deem not to take on that responsibility, but there's an opportunity to. And I think that's really important. And I also want to say, talking about the importance of development and developers and graphic designers isn't to dismiss the importance of other people, right? This isn't about, right, when I say these people matter, I'm not saying those people don't matter. I'm just saying there is an opportunity on Board Game Geek and elsewhere to start recognizing the hard work and effort those people do. So, all this complaining, back and forth, I mean, I'm arguing with JR, who is a developer, right? He does that work. I do that work sometimes, but he does it way more than I do. And why? And I said, I sat back and I wrote I'm just complaining on a private forum. And I said, what can I do? Like in my head, what can I do? This is important to me. And it should be important to everybody. And so what I can do is I can make a video about it. I can use the little mini platform soapbox that I have to talk about it briefly. And then I can also commit to, working with, if Board Game Geek wants to do this, to help them set that up, or if they need to do a funding campaign or ask some questions or brainstorm. But this is my contribution, right? Because I think it's important. So, please, developers. Developers have a broad range, role, and responsibilities from company to company. But essentially, when somebody says, I'm a developer, a board game developer, which is very different than video games, you are somebody who has received a design from a designer. And typically that design often is really pen and paper, sort of, here are the components, here are the pieces. It's been thought through, it's been played, but not refined all the way through. And a developer will often be a key play tester. There'll be somebody who plays the game a lot. And then they work through the integration of the game with the product, the board, size of components, what components to use. So you sort of have this product developer role. You have the gameplay, refinement developer role. A lot of times that developer will do the instructions. So it's the instruction writing role. And then integration and working with the graphic designer and the artist, right? The designer often, though not always, sort of hands over their design, and then the publisher works on it, but it's the developer at the publisher who's doing this, who's triangulating it, making sure it works. Oftentimes, one of the most passionate people about the project. And in some ways, the most, because they're, sometimes the illustrator is just paid to do some art. The graphic designer is brought in to create some looks, and the designer has sort of handed off their stuff, and they care about it. But the product as it is, that is handed to the player at the end of the day, person who probably was touching that the most was the developer. Again, in bigger projects, there's certainly projects where there is no developer, right? And there's certainly projects where the developer has 70 games and they don't care. Look, there's always a spectrum, okay? So that developer role, interface, communication, making sure that it's easy to understand and engage the game, ensuring that it's fun, finding corner cases, trying to break it, all those things. Oftentimes, games that people buy, especially when you're dealing with Kickstarters, right? They're good. They have the substance to be great, but they're not. And often they're not because they didn't have a good developer. I assure you, if developers had credits and you could look up a developer and see the games they worked on, you'd be like, oh my, this guy has worked on all these great games I love. Yeah. And part of the reason you love it, and gal, by the way, or gal, is because they did. Graphic designers, are artists who are also designers, who are people that understand user expectations, experience, interaction, information, how you understand things, and they create the iconography and usually any sort of graphic element on top of your illustrations. not always the case, but quite often the case, where a graphic designer is somebody who's going to be, doing the frame, the layout, how information presented, the font choice, font type. Again, you can see, especially in Kickstarter, games that don't have graphic designers. They have designers and artists and illustrators, but not graphic designers, because it's all there, but it's not as clear as it could be. It's not as sharp as it could be. It's not as easy to grok as it could be. And a graphic designer is in there doing that. Oftentimes, that sensibility for the user and the user experience and understanding what they're doing flows from the graphic designer. Good manuals flow from the graphic designer with the developer or the designer, right? I don't want to discredit the places where designers are just the only designers and there's only one artist, or it's one person who does everything, right? So that graphic designer is so key to you understanding, appreciating, and enjoying the masterful design of something. And it is art, it is talent, it is design, and those people deserve recognition, and they deserve to be able to go to Board Game Geek and see the stuff that they worked on and have it listed with their name. And so, it's interesting, board games, in video games, you have almost zero celebrity. In video games, there are very few names anyone recognizes at all, right? Miyamoto, Cliff Bleszinski, Sid Meier. There are names, and if you're really into indie or in other spaces, but like in the grand scheme of the end user, the gamers, there isn't as much exposure because video games are complicated. They take teams. Everyone has to be there together, and they're all working, and you have an art team, and you list all the artists. You have the design team, and you have leads and stuff. There's plenty of credit, dynamics that go on. But since very few games have that celebrity up front, here's the designer, here's the artist bit in video games, because the teams are so big and so complicated and so integrated, you don't sort of see what you see in the film industry. The film industry is a place where you do have celebrity, right? You have the actors and actresses, and then you have the directors, right? And to some extent the producers, and to some extent the writers, but there's you guys know who Spielberg is, right? You know these great directors. They're promoted. They're awarded, right? There are award shows that recognize these other key roles. Do those roles represent all the people who work hard on a movie? No, man. Or woman, whoever. No, right? Go watch Civil War. Go see some Finding Dory and watch the credits and just sit, for the 20 minutes of 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 people that are involved. And not even, again, you could step to marketing and the people who ship the games, and you could extend past. But in a movie, just the people who made it, just the creative and mechanical and all the people who get involved in that project to produce the film, list is huge. But you still have celebrity. But if you go to IMDb, you can still see everybody's credits. And so board games is in this weird place where there are a lot of people involved in board game making, and they all have major contributions, even beyond getting outside of manufacturing and marketing and all those, sticking to this, what gets made. But we have sort of a mini celebrity around the designer and the artists that get promoted. So I just think it's really important. I see so many developers working hard, so many graphic designers working hard, and it's so fundamental to, in my opinion, how to make great, fantastic games that everyone loves and enjoys, that I really want people to understand and recognize who those people are. I don't even know who they are, right? I only know the ones I've worked with. Otherwise, they're like, in some sort of vacuum. So, look, I really want to express the importance inherent to developers and graphic designers. My career started in QA, right? QA in video games, they're like bottom rung, bottom ladder. But the experience between good QA and bad QA in a video game is like night and day. Bad QA is if you're sitting there, your game's crashing, it's closing, it's erasing your data, there's all these glitches and art things. That sucks. That sucks, and you know it as an end user. Same thing, and I want to recognize playtesters and beta, but the development and graphic design work in board games is substantial and has a real impact to the enjoyment, fun, and experience. It's not some work anybody could do. It's not. You have to be talented and you deserve credit. And I can't even say my entire career I've been perfect about all this. I haven't. I've come to appreciate these things over time. I've come to understand this over time. And what I think needs to happen is Board Game Geek. I mean, this is really specific. I would like to see Board Game Geek find a way to provide a space for those types of credits, whether it's just a region or adding something. Right now, again, it's designer, artist, publisher. Well, publisher isn't a person, it's a company. How can you respect and reflect those people? And again, if it's about helping fundraise, if it's about figuring out the time, if it's about, there's a lot of different things, but I really do think it's important, and it really should be important not only to developers and graphic designers, but it should also be important to designers and artists, because these are people they work with, and it should also be important to the end user, because this stuff makes great games, and you should want to know who made that game that you bought, and you know that when you picked it up and opened it up, all the pieces were put together well, you knew how to play, you knew how to get in and get going. Right? So, that's it. Hope this was at least at a minimum interesting. Thanks a lot. Bye.